Oh, here it goes. Oh, great. Oh! Let's begin. All right, so this is a fantastic question because solar flares are pretty much the start of almost all solar events. And since almost all space weather comes from the sun, not everything, but most space weather comes from the sun, getting to the heart of a solar flare is fantastic. What you'll see is most media, most people talk about solar flares differently. A solar flare basically is just the energy released from the sun. How we measure them here is we measure them by X-ray energy, how much X-ray flux is coming from the sun. So the sun has a normal amount of energy it gives off. It glows, it produces this energy. And some of these active regions sometimes release super bursts of energy. Well, it takes a little over 8 minutes to get here, we measure it, and that's a solar flare. And these solar flares, what the heart of the cause is it's magnetic problems. The sun's a big magnet, the Earth's a big magnet, but the sunspots, these active regions where the solar flares happen from, are just really complex magnetic problems. It's like having a rubber band twisting up in your hand and it gets in a knot. The magnetic field in that sunspot's doing that. Sooner or later you twist it, and it breaks. And if you break a rubber band, it goes straight. The magnetic fields go straight, and when those magnetic fields reconnect on the sun, that's actually, they heat up and glow, and that's actually the solar flare. Different places measure them. Back in the day, they actually measured the brightness they could see in the picture in the area. And the Air Force, we still partner with the Air Force, they actually still measure solar flares this way. The way we do it now is just the X-ray flux from. But it's the heart of all space weather. It starts a lot of the process with coronal mass ejections and protons. It starts a lot of it, but they all start at the sunspots, and usually that flare is right there. Put anything together, two electric charges, sooner or later they're going to spark. You do static electricity, sooner or later you spark. Something just starts, something creates it to spark, and you'll get a sunspot, and then that's where the activity comes in. Big is a relative term, but when I started, we were at the background, at the dirt. And so they have different layers of flares. We do A, B, C, M, X. Really weird solar flare. It's a scientific terminology. When I started, we were at the A levels. We also do a new nomenclature. We try to do it like hurricanes. You have a hurricane 1 through 5. Most people don't know what the wind speeds are, but you know 1's the little one, 5's the big one. We had, for us, we do radio blackouts. So when a solar flare happens on the sun, that's great. When it affects the Earth, it causes radio blackouts. So we call them radio blackout storms, but they're the same phenomenon, just one's on the sun, one's on the Earth. So we had R1 radio blackout just yesterday. And so we had an active region, and what's great about this is we have active regions on the sun, we're watching for solar flares. This is a region that's just turning around the sun. We can't even see the sunspots, we can't even see the magnetic knot, but yet it released its energy in a solar flare, and we had an R1 radio blackout. So forecasters here now are watching this region as it rotates on. But that's the biggest one in the last couple days. I've seen all the way up to R3. The scale goes to R5, which are the big ones. I haven't seen any of those yet. But, you know, we're still pretty far in the middle of the cycle. So like, you know, hurricanes, it's a 1 year cycle, 5 months busy, 7 months not so much. Space weather is an 11-year cycle, so 7 years not so much, 5 years pretty active. We're about 2.5 to 3 years in the active part, so we still got a lot of time left. But the biggest one in the last couple of days has been R1. I think that's a great question because everybody thinks that their job is the most important. When I was in the Army, the tankers, I was a tanker, and the guy who gives you the gas, his job's the most important because without gas you can't move. So everybody's important to solving the problem. And I think space weather is no different. We're part of NCEP, which is the National Center for Environmental Prediction. There's 11 other NCEPs, the Tsunami Warning Center, the Ash Center, the Severe Storm Center, the Hurricane Center. So there's a lot of centers that the government has said, hey, these places are very important to, you know, the infrastructure of America. So to be up there, I know we're super important. I know that what we do is important. You know, the one end of the spectrum is this could, the end-all be-all storm could, you know, really disrupt life as we know it, especially the more susceptible technology we are nowadays. But on the other end, you know, we could have years and years of no storms. So you can't put all your eggs in the basket that the world's going to end, but you can't neglect the problem. So I think how we're doing it now is you have a small group, part of the National Weather Service, part of the NSEP program, where you keep the money going, you keep funding new research, and you just do your best to mitigate the problem without buying in wholeheartedly and putting all your money into it. But I think the program they have right now is fantastic. They know we're important. Right now, we are a national critical system, so we're heightened up. If we don't get data for 2 hours, we have to send emails to Washington, D.C., and people want to know why we're not doing our job. So it is important, but you just can't put all the eggs in the end-all, the doom and gloom scenario. But I think right now we're getting our proper attention. Shouldn't be on the front news every day, but shouldn't be forgotten about. Honestly, I just knew I really wasn't ready for school. I knew when I was young, my dad was in the Army, both grandfathers were in the military, so there's some kind of some pride that, go serve your country. But I watched a lot of military movies. I mean, who doesn't nowadays? But I watched a lot of military movies, and I wanted to do something for my country. I knew I wasn't ready for school, and I knew that Uncle Sam would help pay for school. We didn't have money, stowed away for school. I didn't really have my ducks in a row to get a scholarship. I wasn't a big football player. I was the little guy. But so I just really didn't have it. It seemed like the best path, and by far Uncle Sam was the best uncle I ever had. But I just knew that was the path. Paying for school was a huge, huge factor. I know a lot of states will help pay for school, but not having that, go into debt right away was a big deal.